A grieving bride refuses to take off her wedding dress, convinced her dead fiancé will return for her. But when she vanishes without a trace, what's left behind is a mystery no one can explain. I once knew a girl who never took off her wedding dress. Pauline was a sweet, dreamy kind of person who lived just across the street from me. We weren't particularly close growing up. She was about 5 years older, but our parents were friends. I think she even babysat me once or twice when I was little. When my mom heard Pauline was engaged, she volunteered me to help her with the bachelorette party. Poor mom thought my lack of feminine interest came from spending too much time around boys. She figured maybe I'd learn something by being around a bride-to-be. But the truth was quite the opposite. That's when I first heard about the blood vow. Pauline told me, while slowly twisting her ruby ring around her finger, that she and her fiancé had made a promise sealed in blood. Whoever dies first, she said softly, takes the other with them, as soon as they can. Isn't that a little dramatic? I asked, half joking. What if you two break up or end up marrying someone else? She smiled, as if the thought were absurd. That's not going to happen. We're soulmates. There was something beautiful, and almost haunting, about her innocence. I was 21 at the time, she was 26, but somehow I felt older than her. Still, I didn't push the conversation. Pauline kept speaking about him in this dreamy, faraway voice. Aiden would love this, she'd say. Oh, I wish Aiden could see it. She said it with such tenderness that, for a moment, you almost believed soulmates were real, and that maybe, just maybe, love could follow you into the afterlife if you wanted it badly enough. Her friends were lovely, and the party turned out better than I'd expected. At one point, Pauline began sharing her ideas about what comes after death, how, in her mind, you could wake up in the next world and shape it with just your thoughts. Of course, she added, your memory would be fuzzy. That's what the blood vow is for, so we'll remember each other. How would one bring the other back? I asked, indulging her. She gave a soft laugh. I like to think we'd both grow wings. Looking back, it all sounds so naive. But Pauline had this way of speaking, like every word was part of a secret, beautiful world only she could see, and we all leaned in to hear more. Despite the age gap, we eventually became real friends. It felt like we'd finally reached a point in life where that no longer mattered. I was still living at home, going to college, not working, so I had time. I went with her to dress fittings, cake tastings, and all those little bridal rituals that suddenly seemed important. But Pauline was never the kind of bride to throw tantrums or obsess over centerpieces. She was calm, content, just genuinely happy to be marrying the love of her life. She only wanted everything to be as beautiful as it could be, for him. And the more time I spent with them, the more I began to understand her devotion. Aiden looked at her like she was magic. Whenever they were together, the world felt just a little brighter, a little warmer, like soft marshmallows melting in your chest. And then, about 6 months after the bachelorette party, the wedding day finally arrived. It wasn't a grand, glamorous event, nor was it a modest backyard affair, it was just right. It felt intentional. Like Pauline and Aiden had invited exactly who they wanted to share the happiest day of their lives with. No distant relatives out of obligation. No awkward coworkers. No strangers lingering in the background. And somehow, being there, among their chosen few, made me feel proud. Like I earned my place in that moment. But the happiest day never came. Pauline arrived fashionably late, as brides often do, her white dress trailing softly behind her. She looked radiant, calm, utterly sure of herself. Yet the moment she stepped inside the venue, a hush swept through the room like a draft. A subtle shift in the air, tension. Unease. Because Aiden wasn't there. Still, Pauline's smile didn't falter. She stood with perfect poise, her hands resting gently on her bouquet, fully confident he'd walk through the doors any minute. But I saw it in her eyes, a flicker of doubt. The smallest crack. Her bridesmaids, along with her two childhood best friends, sprang into action. Phones out, hushed voices, frantic calls. No one knew what had happened. At first, it was just confusion. Miscommunication, perhaps. A minor delay. Then someone confirmed that Aiden's parents had already arrived, but his brother hadn't. That was strange. We soon learned that it had been Aiden's brother who was supposed to drive him to the ceremony. That was his one big duty as best man. Just get him there. And then came the news that changed everything. There had been an accident. A red sports car ran a red light at an intersection. It slammed into Aiden's vehicle at full speed. Aiden was in the passenger seat. He died on impact. His brother, the driver, survived, barely. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Spinal injury. Permanent paralysis. He'd never walk again. I was told later that he wakes up some nights, crying, consumed by guilt, wishing he'd died instead. Wishing he'd traded places with his brother. Afterward, everything fell apart. The house Aiden and Pauline had just bought together was quietly put on the market. Pauline moved back in with her parents, and they returned to their daily routines like nothing had happened, going to the office, packing lunches, pretending the world was still turning normally. But it wasn't. We, her friends, neighbors, rotated in and out of the house, trying to make sure she was never alone for too long. But it didn't matter. Pauline was no longer with us. Not really. Her body was in that house. Her voice still spoke. But her mind, her soul, was somewhere else entirely. She had drifted into a world of her own, a quiet, isolated delusion. And the only thing that leaked into our reality was her grief. I had never witnessed sorrow like that before. Not even in the movies. It was raw. It was endless. It didn't fade with time, it deepened. Like it had roots. Pauline refused to take off her wedding dress. She wore it every single day, sitting by the window, staring out like she was waiting for a carriage that never came. At night, she cried uncontrollably, not the silent tears of someone trying to hold it together, but deep, aching sobs that shook the walls. She missed him. Every day. Every single day. But she didn't believe he was gone forever. She believed, truly believed, that it was only a matter of time before Aiden would wake up on the other side. And when he did, he'd remember their blood vow. He'd come back for her. That's why she wouldn't take off the dress. He had died in his tuxedo, so she had to be ready, in full bridal attire, when he came to get her. Her parents tried to reason with her. So did her friends, her neighbors, even her childhood priest. They told her she could keep the dress close, folded neatly in a box, tucked safely in her closet, just in case. They begged her to change, to eat, to sleep in a real bed again. But she just looked at them like they were children promising toys they'd never buy. She knew none of us truly believed he was coming back. And that made her even more alone. Because in her mind, she hadn't lost him. She was still waiting. No one dared to challenge her grief, not directly. No one tried to force her to take off the dress. It was sacred now. A boundary. A ritual. She wore it every hour of every day. She slept in it. She even bathed in it. The climate in our town was warm and dry, so the fabric dried quickly in the sun. But everything else was a slow descent into horror. What had once been a delicate masterpiece of organza and silk, a gown fit for a fairytale bride, had become something grotesque. The hem was shredded. The bodice sagged with dirt and sweat. The once white fabric was now yellowed, stained, and reeking of mildew and decay. But she wouldn't take it off. Not for anyone. Not even for herself. Eventually, she developed a new belief. If she changed out of the dress, Aidan wouldn't recognize her. She said he was searching, trying to find her through the haze of death and memory, and the dress was the only thing anchoring her to him. If she wore anything else, she'd become just another face in the crowd. Just another soul he'd overlook. No amount of logic could reach her. She still saw a therapist 3 times a week, but there were no signs of progress. If anything, her condition was unraveling further. Her grief and PTSD had metastasized into something darker, a slow, creeping psychosis. She began to talk to Aidan. Not like someone reminiscing, but like someone having actual conversations. And then, one day, she started insisting that he was there. In the room. Beside her. Watching. Listening. "He's close," she'd whisper. "I can feel it. He's learning how to fly with his new wings. It's hard at first, you know." She said it with such heartbreaking conviction that none of us knew what to say. We wanted to comfort her, to anchor her to reality, but what could we offer that didn't sound cruel? We weren't talking to the Pauline we once knew. We were speaking to someone suspended between 2 worlds. And then, one morning, she vanished. No one saw her leave. No one remembered hearing a door open. Her parents assumed she was still asleep, curled up on the old couch in the sunroom. But by noon, when they knocked gently on the door and called her name, there was nothing. She was gone. The search began within hours. The neighborhood combed the streets. The police were contacted. Flyers went up. Drones were flown. But she disappeared like mist. 2 days later, we found it. The wedding dress. It was crumpled in a small grove of trees just beyond her parents' backyard, a quiet place she used to sit as a child. And on the back of the gown, 2 enormous tears. As if something had burst through the fabric from the inside. As if she had, quite literally, sprouted wings. Some people called it symbolic. Others, especially those who loved her, chose to believe it was real. Her mother, through tears, finally confessed what none of us had dared to say aloud. She believed Aidan had come back. That he'd found her. And taken her with him. Not everyone was comfortable with that explanation, the idea of some ghostly rescue, some mystical reunion beyond death. But it brought a strange peace. Not joy. Never that. But something close to acceptance. We didn't celebrate her disappearance, no one threw flowers or sang songs, but we allowed ourselves to hope that she was finally at rest. She had always been too delicate for this world, too full of dreams and devotion. Maybe, just maybe, she had slipped the cage of her human body. Maybe the dress really had been her cocoon. A small, heartfelt memorial was held in the backyard. There were candles, soft music, and framed photos of her in better days. And slowly, life began to move forward again, one breath, 1 hour, one hesitant step at a time. Now, you might ask me, what do I believe? And I'd probably give you a bitter smile. Because I don't have the luxury of belief anymore. I know the truth. You see, I was the one who found Pauline. Not in the grove. Not with wings. Not with magic. But in the bathtub. Cold. Pale. Still. She had died in silence, alone, the same way she had grieved. And I was the one who cleaned up the scene. I was the one who made her vanish. Getting rid of the body was the hardest thing I've ever done. But oddly, restoring the dress, sewing the tears, shaping the story, that part felt healing. Like giving her a myth to rise into. And I think Pauline would have liked that. She always preferred the legend over the truth. A romantic, haunting disappearance suited her far better than a lonely, ordinary death.